Over the last 2 days, I've been playing through Bloodroots, a high-energy action game developed by Paper Cult Games. I was introduced to this game by my favorite podcast, Kinda Funny Games, and they just wouldn't shut up about it for around a week straight prior to its release. So when it finally did release, I decided to take a crack at it and see what this was about. I wasn't quite sure what type of game it was before going in. However, I'm always one willing to take a gamble on an indie game, because even if it turns out I don't like it whatsoever, I at least had the opportunity to support an independent developer by throwing them a couple of bucks, which I would never have a problem with. Earlier in the week, I took a chance on Murder by Numbers, a Picross-focused visual novel that grabbed me because its visual style and its writing seemed very intriguing. I was very into it from the start because of its narrative. However, its gameplay failed to grab me. I did not get into the Picross puzzles whatsoever, and it just wasn't... The story was not a good trade-off for having to deal with the Picross puzzles. I was not engaged in the gameplay whatsoever, but I did not regret that because I still was able to support that developer with my 10 or so bucks that I got it for. After that, my attention turned to Bloodroots, which is essentially the polar opposite of Murder by Numbers, which the sole attraction of that game, for me at least, was its interesting narrative and dialogue. Now, Bloodroots is a complete opposite of that. Its main attraction is its intense action, its gameplay. Though, surprisingly, the narrative and lore behind Bloodroots became very enticing and nuanced as you progressed throughout the game. What appeared to at first be just merely a simplistic backdrop just to give the game some sort of theming or reason to have this progression actually turned out to be a charmingly written and interesting story full of a cast of characters that really lend themselves well to this world full of chaos and bloodlust. Narratively, your goal is to get revenge on those who have wronged you in the past. Each act of the game focuses on a single individual who you must hunt down after mowing your way through various stages of fodder enemies, leaving a blood-soaked path behind you as you set off towards revenge. While the narrative is very solidly crafted, there is no doubt that the true meat of this game is within its gameplay. Now, the gameplay revolves entirely around causing as much chaos and bloodshed as possible, as fast as possible. Now, unlike most action games where you focus on a single weapon, you upgrade that weapon. Maybe you get a secondary weapon, you upgrade that through different skill trees. This game is all about using the environment as your weapon. Nearly everything in the environment can be used as a weapon. You've got carrots, you've got rifles, if you bring a fence, you can use the fence poles to smack people with. You can use barrels to run over people with. Now, all these weapons are degradable. You have max 3 uses for weapons. Some weapons 1 use, but generally the max was 3 for most weapons. And that really encourages you to use as much as possible, to not rely on using a singular weapon. It's an incredibly fun system that turns what might otherwise be a gratingly repetitive game into an incredible joy to play through, and it's kept varied by consistently doling out new and inventive ways to slaughter your enemies with ease. This is by far one of the most purely fun games I have played in quite some time that doesn't have some caveat that brings down the overall experience. Some may say that its challenging nature brings this experience down. However, I only found it to be an incredible incentive to keep going run after run, because while challenging, there was never a point in which I felt the game was being unfair. Every failure was a direct consequence of my actions, whether that would be because I was running in foolishly, unprepared with absolutely nothing at my disposal, or I took a hit too early. I strike too early, because you will go down in one hit. And if you get hit, you have to do an entire section over again. You got to do these sections in a singular run. And that might be a little frustrating to some people. However, it was incredibly satisfying to me to be able to go in, understand exactly where every single weapon is, and find the best way to use these weapons to get through that area as fast as possible, jumping around, smacking people around. It was an absolute joy to play, and its singular goal of destroying absolutely everybody, I guess it can be repetitive to some, but it was just such a joy to play that I never found it a problem. Now, I think I spent roughly 8 or so hours in Bloodroots world, learning and mastering its combat, and I still feel like there is so much more potential for me to uncover, because once again, there's just so much satisfaction with being able to do a flawless run, going as fluidly as possible, because this gameplay really does not let itself get distracted by any needless complex mechanics. It instead allows itself to really dig into its cartoonishly charming aesthetic by allowing players to smack people around with carrots and roll over them with barrels in the most satisfyingly simplistic ways. Overall, I found Bloodroots to be an incredibly entertaining time. It provided me with fast and brutal action, and it was honestly just such a charming challenge that tested my skills more than I ever expected it to. I love this game more than I ever thought I would. I expected to go into it, play a level or two, but what I found myself doing was just plowing through it because I just could not get enough of that loop. Now, there were a few times where I did get incredibly frustrated, where I just felt that it was absolutely impossible to achieve what the game was asking me to achieve. This was mainly in one of the boss battles. There's a singular boss battle that gave me a little bit of a frustrating time. However, it was such a great battle looking back at it. There was a specific way I was trying to do it, but then I could see there's other ways that you could do it that I just was too stubborn to try out. However, I did eventually, after much trial and error, figure out how to do it. And that's really, to me, the real core of the game is the developers give you a tool set. They give you a tool set to use, and they want you to figure out how to do it by yourself. They give you options. They want you to experiment and have fun with all these crazy weapons that you have at your disposal. Overall, this game is an absolute recommendation for just about anybody who likes fun action games. Plus, it's an indie developer, so go support them. But that's all I really have to say about Bloodroots. It was an incredibly fun time. If you have any questions about it, if you want to say something about Bloodroots, maybe you hate it, maybe you despise it, is what it is. You know what? If you have anything to say, leave it in the comments. Otherwise, you have yourselves a fantastic day.